Port of Siuslaw meeting for Wednesday, July 16th. And the first item is approval of the agenda. Commissioners,
I'd like to make a motion to approve, unless, do you have a?
I'll second it.
Okay.
in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the next thing on our agenda is a presentation by Paul Engelmeyer from the Audubon Society. So it's your show, Paul.
Great, thank you. Really appreciate this opportunity to come and give this presentation on coastal conservation issues and strategies. I'm just located just north, is it okay to sit down, is that okay? Just north of you and between Florence and Yachts, and I manage land for Audubon Society. I've been doing it since 1990. And we deal with conservation strategies in the terrestrial side, in the near shore, and of course region-wide related to the important bird area program. So I'm going to be going kind of quick because I think this is a good opportunity. I'd rather get a lot of things in front of you, and then if we have good questions and answers, then I can kind of make it go longer. Okay. So let's see if this works okay. This is new to me here. Slow down. Oh boy, that's quick. Okay. Soft. So I'll be introducing to you, maybe you're all very aware of Goal 19, the Native Fish Conservation Policy. I'll talk about marine reserves, some of the ecological values of that near shore north of here. And then I'll probably introduce you to something new, which is an important bird area program. And then talk about the marbled murrelet, and then some of our goals related to the marine reserve and marine protected area.
Paul, land use goals for the state of Oregon, goal 19.
Correct.
Okay.
Excellent. Okay. Here's the community of Yachats, and the northern boundary of the marine protected area is basically halfway down that beach. Surf Smelt Beach right there. That'd be the northern boundary. From there, and it goes out to 3 miles. So that's the northern boundary, and as we go forward, we'll look at different locations of the effort. So Goal 19, if we boil down the key points related to Goal 19, it talks about protecting important marine habitat. And that habitat needed to assure survival of threatened and endangered species, or ecological significance to maintaining ecosystem structure, productivity, diversity, life history patterns, behaviors. So that's really, if you took the 5-page document, really what it comes down to is we want to protect habitat and the species associated to the habitat and these unique species that are in our near shore. Okay. And then when we talk about the ocean, most folks jump right to it's got to be fish. Well, of course, my role is to make sure seabirds are in the discussion. Whether it is pigeon guillemots, auklets, puffins, murres, or marbled murrelet. And then I was a part of the Native Fish Conservation Policy. I was on the advisory team for the state in 2002. And then again, it was really work, and but when you come down to it, it talks about absent of information in management, you need to take a precautionary approach. Okay, so it's real. You know, it's a good document, and it was a lot of hard work to get through it. I don't know if you've chewed on it. It's ODFW's document, but it's really a good document. Oregon ODFW should be proud of all the work that went into it. And then Oregon Fish and Wildlife had a presentation about these issues of ocean conservation in 2007. And there was a clear acknowledgement about setting aside critical habitats and habitat types as a tool that could work in conjunction with this precautionary approach. And I'll get into this, why we should take a precautionary approach in a second. And then I was also the statewide conservation representative on the Ocean Policy Advisory Council, OPAC, okay? And again, we created a policy guidance document, and then when you boil it down to some of the key bullets on it, it's again talking about protecting and sustaining a system of fewer than 10 marine reserves in the territorial sea, and that would actually protect marine habitats and the biodiversity associated to them. And then use these as reference areas and use an adaptive management approach. And again, this was a real challenge for OPAC to come up with a document, a policy guidance document, but it's something that when we came out the other end of it, we've got a document that's really clear and gives us the state clear direction. And again, some of our visitors, you may or may not know these, but They actually live in the Cascades, but they visit our near shore in our subtidal, so they forage in the subtidal, but they're really residents of the Cascades and beyond, believe it or not. So then we go back again talking about the nearshore fishes and the realization that Oregon Fish and Wildlife does assessments. And everyone's real clear that, yep, we do assessments. But the reality of it is they do assessments on about 25% of what's out there. Okay? So there's 8 that are assessed, 35 that are unassessed. Okay? And of those 8 that are assessed, we've got 2 of them that are depleted. Everybody's probably read a bunch about the canary and the yellow eye. Okay? And then we do have healthy ones. So blues and blacks and yellowtail. And so, again, we fall back to that precautionary approach when there's insufficient information or no information. And so all you're doing is really, as the agency was laying the groundwork when they produced this graph, that there is a lot of unknowns that are out there. Okay? And then you take that one step further, talking about ecological function of these species that we're speaking to. And so many people have kind of heard the rumor that some of these rockfish are old. If you look close at that, quillback, 90 years, okay? Boccaccio, 50, 84 for canary. Out on the slope, you've got some that are 150 and some that are 200, okay? So you realize China, copper is 50, 60, 80 years old. So these are long-lived animals, and we really didn't know that until Dr. Stephen Berkeley started to do this analysis on their otoliths, which is basically the equivalent of a tree ring. It's in their jaw, in their head, basically. And then they polish them up, and they can actually count how old they are. So that was kind of realization of these fish are old. If we're going to protect them, we need to talk about a protection strategy to protect these some of these long-lived rockfish. POP, Pacific Ocean perch, 100 years old. Okay. So then we take this one step further: is they live long, and there's a different value, an ecological value to protecting that long-lived rockfish. So this is a vermilion rockfish, okay? And when they're long, maybe I'll introduce you to another acronym. I know that all of us have a lot of acronyms in our hip pocket. See if you've heard of the one BOF. Does that resonate with any of you yet? New word. Big, old, fat, female, fecund fish. Okay. They produce a lot of live larvae. 1.7 million. And this is only a 24-inch fish. Okay? So it's long-lived, and it produces 1.7 million live fish. So there's a reason for that. I'm not going to go into it now because I got to make sure that I get through my presentation. But if someone asks me the question, I'll answer it later on. Okay. What are marine reserves? Okay. Fully protected from activities that remove animals and plants or alter habitats, except for scientific monitoring. Around the world, there are hundreds of reserves, but in reality, much less than 1% of the ocean is fully protected. And there's been significant scientific research at over 100, 125 around the world, and there's a consistent results. Increased biomass, increased diversity, increase the size of the fish within the marine reserves. So here would be a map of where they've studied around the world. And then when you go in closer, it's over 400% increase in biomass inside the reserve. Density 150, you go through a consistent response around the world, whether you're in tropical waters or in temperate waters. When this was all starting about 35 years ago down in New Zealand, it was always thought, well, it would only really, these reserves would really work best in tropical waters, where they don't perceive as having a management plans. But in fact, when you look closer, we've got these long-lived rockfish, and you know what? You have the same response. Increased biomass, increased diversity, and increased productivity. And then here's our system of marine reserves right now. 2009, redfish rocks, outer rocks were put in play, and in 2012, Cape Falcon, Cascade Head, and Cape Perpetua. It's ballpark, it's less than 10% of the territorial sea. And then when we zoom in on our area, north of here, you talk about habitat diversity, intertidal, subtidal, sandy bottom, as well as perpetual reef complex. And then, of course, the Sea Lion Caves is a primary wintering nursery for stellar sea lions, listed under the Endangered Species Act in '96, and it's a nursery for this population as well. And then Oregon Fish and Wildlife had been doing, realizing that this Perpetua Stonewall Heceta Banks complex was special. In 2000, 2001, they started doing underwater video work on a remote underwater vessel. And they started being able to document these depleted rockfish, canary present, yellow eye present, as well as blues, black, browns, china, quillback, copper, etc. You know, so we know that they're at those rocky reefs that are in the Perpetua area. And then here it came out the footprint. So we struggled for right at a year. It had representation from ports, sport fishing, commercial fishing, conservation, recreation, elected officials. It was about 30 people. Some were from Florence, some were from fishing community in Newport, some were from the community of yachts. So it was a good representation. We came out with a 15-to-1 endorsing this footprint. So north of Yachats, a marine protected area that you could drag hooks for salmon and fish on the sandy bottom. You wouldn't fish for the long-lived rockfish, and you can't fish for forage fish. And then the No-Take Marine Reserve in the middle, the RAD, and then the same down in the southern end. And then we go back again to the ecological components of this area. That reef that we call there, I mean, you know, I don't want to kind of act like this reef is more than it is, you know. It's disjunct rocky patches, you know. And, but again, those species that are associated to reef are all present. So it's not like the Port Orford Reef or the Nelscott Reef. That's a really awesome structure that's out there, you know. And so this is more of disjunct rocky patch. That's the way ODFW describes it. And then of course uplands, we have the wildernesses and a whole restoration strategy going on the terrestrial side. So we actually describe it as a ridgetop to reef conservation strategy. And then we go back again talking about ecological significance. This is the largest brant cormorant breeding colony on the Pacific. And then we also have marine mammal haulouts, whale migration. I just had awesome photos this year of the cow-calf combinations heading north right off of Heceta Head. Unbelievable vistas, spectacular. Again, as you know, when they're moving north, they'll migrate very close to the beach. Whereas when they're heading south, they're more like 5 and 6 miles out. And you see them, but not like when they're heading north. And then, of course, the sea lion, seabird colonies, the highest concentration of marbled murrelets in the entire coast is in that near shore from north of Florence to south of Walport. And it's been recently designated as a globally significant important bird area. And so this IBA, Important Bird Area Program, started by BirdLife International in London in the 80s, and around the nation, around the world and around the United States, different states took the lead on it. So Audubon Society of Portland pulled together specialists from the university, the agencies, interested folks, and identified IBAs. They had technical criteria you had to meet. Your Siuslaw estuary meets the criteria. It's an important bird area. And so we have about 100 important bird areas around the state. 30 of them more or less are on the beach, on the coast. All of our estuaries meet the criteria. And our technical team says, well, you know what, we've got some hot spots in the ocean. Heceta Perpetua Stonewall Banks was one. And Astoria Canyon. So in any event, our IBA team says, let's pull together and let's talk about this issue in the ocean. And we realized the little panel on the right has a circle on the top. If we walked up and read it, you would see Astoria Canyon. 750,000 sooty shearwaters come and forage consistently right there in that Astoria Canyon. Then you go down to the middle of the panel, and that's the Heceta Perpetua Stonewall Banks complex. You've got fulmars, albatross, shearwaters, all coming from all over the Pacific consistently to forage in our front yard. If you look at the ocean, if you look towards the Coast Range, it's our backyard. So it's about anywhere from 3 to 30 miles offshore, that complex of reefs off there. And again, shearwaters, they come all the way from Chile to forage there and from New Zealand. The albatross come from the atolls in the Pacific. And of course, historically, you could go to off the coast here and talk to the fishermen and say, okay, albatross, do you know them? Oh, of course we know them. And we see them and they go that direction. They would point south and west. And of course, you talk to folks down in the Pacific and they go, of course we see them, and they go that direction. They would point north and east. So they're going back and forth from the atolls, actually come to forage here, to turn around and go back and feed their chick. And this information is relatively new only because of this new technology, this radio telemetry. They tagged some of these, they started to bounce the information off the satellite into the lab, and they would say the birds are still on the wing and they're still heading towards the west coast of North America, to turn around and go back and then turn that into rich oil to feed the chick. So it's a week on the wing. So basically it's from here to Denver to turn around and go back to feed your chick. It's an awesome story. We didn't know that until recently. So that has evolved into a Baja de Barrow strategy, with Oregon just being one of these marine important bird areas. But we've got over 200 sites, 33 million birds within that network, 150 species, and it's been reviewed and accepted by BirdLife International. And there would be the chain with, you can see the Oregon coast with our IVAs. This was unveiled at the first World Seabird Conference 2 years ago, and our template is now kind of the template that other countries and strategies are moving forward with, this ocean conservation for seabirds. Oops. Okay. That's just an example. And then we do education and research opportunities here. Oregon Fish and Wildlife, Oregon State University, PSCO. If you don't know them, it's Partnerships for Interdisciplinary Studies of Coastal Ocean. They have sites up and down the whole coast, partnering with University in Washington, Oregon, California. We have a site, long-term research site at Strawberry Hill. And so they're one of our partners. When we do field trips, it's easy for us to snag them. They get to tell their story about their research projects. A lot of grad students, a lot of PhDs, a lot of long-term research that goes back 20 plus years. And of course, NOAA is in the near shore and in federal waters as well. And we've got ongoing field trips and projects with Audubon, Siuslaw National Forest, Watershed Councils, and ODFW as partners. And maybe this is a new species for you, and it wouldn't surprise me because they are so secretive when they're in our forests, and they're so small that they're nondescript on the ocean. They are really a challenging bird to see. Even experienced bird watchers, it's a new one, for many bird watchers, Listed under the Endangered Species Act in '92, loss of habitat is the critical thing, but it is also a prey-based issue, what they eat, as well as when there are spills, like the New Carissa spill, major mortality, so they're very vulnerable. And then, so just north of here again, this has been identified as a globally significant important bird area. So all of the Yachats River Basin, Cummins Wilderness, 10 Mile Creek Basin, Rock Creek Basin, Big Creek Basin, Cape Creek Basin, ballpark, it's about 80,000 acres. And then when you take the important bird area link in the ocean, ballpark, it's about 100,000 acres. That's in that globally significant important bird area. The dark green are restoration activities that the Forest Service is doing. Red is some road decommissioning. Yellow is the land acquisition and conservation easement strategies. So there's a list of actions that are happening at the watershed scale, including helicopter placement of large wood, long-term research project that dates back to 1990 in the 10 Mile and Cummins Creek Basin. That's Oregon Fish and Wildlife Research. not the normal district bio. Here, it's more of the research team based in Corvallis, and they do research up and down the whole coast. This is one of their sites. And that's, of course, the little seabird, the marble murrelet. So I do a citizen science project every year where we train folks to look for the little seabird, and then we go in the woods in 6 locations, do the survey at 4:45 to 6:45 in the morning, and we did it just last week and had awesome detections, best year ever, and it was no surprise. The fog bank was about 200 to 400 feet, so we had excellent, they were flying in very low, so we got to see and hear them at higher numbers than normal. And then now I'll introduce you to an issue that's gaining momentum worldwide. It's forage fish, and everybody's very savvy to, anchovies, sardines. I know what those are, but in fact, there's about 30 plus species that are forage fish. It's the food web what we're talking about. And so there's a big push now to better understand forage fish, get a handle on population size, and then predictions for potential impacts, and take a precautionary approach when there's no information. And it's really surprising, there is no information if you look close on most of these species. And then back again to some of the seabirds, as you probably not aware, but whether it's the common mirror or the marble murrelet, they actually dive down, swim down to 200 feet, chasing down these little bitty bait fish, okay? And then pop to the surface, go to their colony, whether it's a mirror like Yaquina Head where there's 65,000, on Yaquina Head up near Newport, or into the forest where the marble murrelet is, to feed the chick, okay? I'm kind of proud of that little photo. That's at 180 feet. That's when I worked in the woods on the research team for the marble murrelet. So I climbed the old growth, gather the data in the upper canopy of the old growth, do photography. So that's, I think, the only footage of the chick being fed by And this is what, just an example of the forage fish we're talking about. This actually is a Eulachon, recently listed under the Endangered Species Act. They spawn in 10 Mile Creek. The only reason we know is because of the research project that's in play. They're listed coast-wide, and the decline is dramatic. And there's a bit of a rebound right now in the lower Columbia, some of those populations, but they describe it as local extirpation in the Klamath and in the Umpqua. But our research project shows at least we do have them spawning consistently at 10 Mile Creek. And of course, we would ask estuaries, do you even know, do you have herring spawn anymore? You know, you ask those questions, and these are projects that we could potentially work on. And this is what we're really talking about. Historically and currently, if you're fortunate enough to see these bait balls, that would be what that's called, and whether it is Muirs feeding on them, you've got Chinook, steelhead, tuna, everything eats those. It's that basic food web process. Whales, it is awesome. So Audubon has a Third for the Birds campaign, ensuring that when we start talking about exploiting these forage fish, we make sure there's enough in there for the seabirds. Ooh. So again, back to the marble murrelet and their forage. Juvenile rockfish, smelt, anchovy, sardine, sand lance, krill, squid. That's basically their buffet. So when groundfish are depleted, you have less juvenile rockfish. When smelt, that's Eulachon, are listed under the Endangered Species Act, that's depleted. You go through the list and you realize that the buffet is not set for a lot of these species. And here's another one that probably, that's again, huge data voids by the agency, just we don't know a whole lot. Pacific lamprey live in the estuaries for about 4 years, and then go to the ocean, so they're anadromous just like salmonids, and then will attach rides, but they don't really, and suck on fish, but they don't really kill them. They're hitching a ride, they're foraging on the blood of fish in the ocean, release and then go back and spawn and then die, become food for a list of species, from eagles to otters, seals, everything eats them. And again, back again to the research opportunities. Field trips at the Audubon Sanctuary with Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. That's part of the research project. That's a smolt trap to the right over there. And these are ongoing. We just had Linfield College yesterday. And this is the southern end of our Marine Reserve, Marine Protected Area, Seabird Protected. And here are some of our goals, talking about cooperative research, citizen science projects, working with Oregon Fish and Wildlife. I'm pretty sure you've heard about the West Coast Governors Alliance. If not, you should put that on your screen. So I think all the ports should be very savvy to that and engage in any way possible. And using these areas as reference areas and engage, of course, the public. School districts are going to be making long-term research projects in these reserves and protected areas. And again, we have seabird nesting projects, murrelet projects, water quality, debris monitoring, coast watch. The murrelet project, we had about 70 folks. The seabird nesting project, which is all summer, I think we've got 16 people, volunteers, once a week, working on that project. The water quality monitoring is a surf rider project, as is the debris monitoring. Coast Watch is Oregon Shores, and they've got all of those miles that they've got volunteers looking at the Marine Reserve, Marine Protected Area. Okay, how was that?
And your
A little bit over
butterfly
here.
area.
And the silver spot butterfly, I didn't talk about that. You can come and work on that project if you want to. That's also there. Yes. Okay, any questions?
Is crabbing allowed in the,
Some parts of the Marine Reserve, yes. Some parts of the Marine Protected Area, yes, where there's sandy bottom. And where the Marine Reserve is, no. And so here's the recent production. Oregon Fish and Wildlife recently we're talking, I had to drive to go get them, so you guys could be the first. Here's a glossy handout. We need to figure out a way to get you some. They couldn't give them me to give to you because there's a distribution strategy, but Stacy Gallagher from ODFW is willing to come down. And so here's the glossy for you. I've got one for you folks, but not enough to put at your handout. So it's the glossy that they put together. And so one for the coast-wide, all the marine reserves. So that gives you a handle on your one for each of you guys. And then here's one for the Cape Perpetual. So that we've got some for the sites. And then here's something that you're probably, if you don't have it yet, you're going to want to do this because I do a lot of presentations and this is what we do. So there's a frequently asked questions that ODFW has put together about marine reserves, marine protected areas. Basically, it comes down to the same set of questions. We called them down into this one pager with a map. And so you can get this on the web. It's on the back of that little handout. And then I've laminated them so when I go, I can lay them out on the table. So it's a Q&A, frequently asked, and then a map of the sites. And then the same type of thing here. And it goes into the ODFW line survey project for folks who like to fish, would like to be a part of a research project. You get on the list. And let me see, it's pretty awesome how many volunteers. 75 volunteers worked on the project. They've caught over 3,000 fish, 27 different species on the project, and it's gathering data for these better understanding what's going on the landscape. And then also for your front, you'd get one of these little handouts here that you can actually I don't have to memorize everything. It's all here. Okay. So that's what you can get, and that's on the website as well. Okay. And then I got a couple more little handouts, and then I'll call it good. So that IBA program, Important Bird Area Program, here you go. If you're interested in that, here you go. And so Siuslaw, you guys hit the bell. So the Siuslaw Estuary is an IBA, okay? And if you don't have, if you don't know, you do have field trips on an ongoing basis. Birders from all over come to your estuary and enjoy it, okay? Because it's an important bird area. And if you don't know that, I should have them call you periodically because they call me all the time and say, hey, we're going to be over in the area. I say, good. Make sure you go out to the jetty. Make sure and I point them in the right direction. So that's something that you should put on your screen. Yeah. You have a question?
yeah, you can have these back, these are extras.
Good. Okay.
I don't want to deplete your supply.
That's great. We've got a couple of interested folks. And so I've got another little handout if folks are interested more about the details about the sanctuary and the background, if you're interested in that. Okay. And then for folks who are interested in the big picture, the B2B, Baja de Barrel. And again, it's kind of hard. I feel really fortunate to be a part of Oregon, kind of leading this, and then unveiling it at the World Seabird Conference. You know, the California Current, everybody kind of can roll that off their tongue pretty easy. That's just one large marine ecosystem, LME. But there's 8 of them around the world. And just like we on the West Coast here have developed this important bird area strategy within the California Current, other LMEs, large marine ecosystems, the one in the Atlantic and the one down in Chile, all of them are doing the same type of thing, trying to understand where are the hot spots and how do we protect the food, the prey base for the species that depend on those hot spots. So again, here's this fact sheet that draws attention to it if you're interested in that. And again, you're one of them. So that's the quick program, and I'm more than willing, if any of you, if you have a group or individual and you feel like an excursion, my name, well, Dan, you've got my contact info. If you're interested in a field trip or something, I do them all the time, and we can set that up with easy. And the stations would be from the top of Cape Perpetua, big picture vista. This is what's going on. And we drop down into the watershed with Oregon Fish and Wildlife. Then we go to the Sayustlo National Forest and talk about what they're doing. And then we go to the sanctuary. So it's 4 stations. Adios. That's what we do. And if students, we want to expose them to some of the research at Strawberry Hill, then we have to make sure it's a good low tide. We pull the researchers over who are doing research at Strawberry Hill State Park so they can actually see the project that's in play. That's really a great way to turn on the high school and the community college and the university students to actually see someone who's working on a real project. When it's low tide and you don't know what you're looking at, sometimes it's like you can see they're doing something here. I don't have a clue what it is, but I can see they're doing something in that subtitle. So it is very interesting to have some of that brain power explain what the strategy is. Yeah.
Paul, I've known you for over a decade,
Yeah.
and I want to extend my appreciation for your knowledge, dedication, and most importantly, your passion for what you're doing. You've never faltered.
Thank you.
You're always an advocate for the ecosystem at all levels, and I really appreciate that. So thank you for your good work.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill.
And for your great presentation
Yes.
tonight.
Great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Thank you.
Excellent
Okay.
job.
Good.
Keep up the good work.
Okay. And I'm serious about the field trip offer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe we can coordinate that with the manager.
So we'll have to back out.
No, I think
Oh, that's a beautiful shot. Wow. In the slideshow.
Open your left hand ambidextrous.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Good job.
Hey, Paul, before you leave, I got one question.
Sure.
From a commercial standpoint,
Yeah.
are the restrictions on the reserve in place now?
Yes.
All that are going to be on the
Yeah.
reserve?
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, it's in play.
I know at one point they phased we could crab there one year, then the next year we couldn't, and.
Yeah,
and
right
so-
now, in the reserve, total restrictions are in place.
Okay.
And if you go and look in last year even, because crab year started in December, everybody starts to drop the pots in December, but then come January 1, they were right on the line. Yeah, and you're a crabber?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that. So you know the Taggart study? Have you heard of the Taggart at
I
all?
have not.
Okay, so they did I think like to hear this story. Taggart et al. Out of Alaska did a research project, a before-after, a Bakke study. So they measured all the males, all the females in this whole area up in Alaska, and then the reserve went into play. Then they kept going back, monitoring inside, outside, inside, outside. So what they found was the males got bigger inside the reserve, and as you know, they're very mobile. They're mobile to 50 miles. So they get bigger and then walk out at a different time of the year and
There are
get
no
caught.
fences.
So it's called spillover. So even though it's a reserve that some folks would say, oh, I'll never get access, but in fact, we now know that it's clear that there is spillover, it is very real, and it's very positive. Whether it is juvenile, and nobody has to question about the value of the BOF, but it's the same thing that those females, you gotta think about the California current, ocean productivity going up and down, okay? So, and that's decadal, okay? So if you're a BOF and you're releasing 1 million of those offspring, and it's a poor ocean, basically you don't really get much productivity. But then that good year, when ocean productivity is high, that's a strong cohort year. So that's why they live long, and then that's why they produce so many live fish. So that's an ecological rationale for survival. Why they live long and why they produce so many live fish. And that spillover of adults and larvae is pretty much proven around the world. Consistent response. So we've got your nursery, so to speak, in play for you.
We just found that the best bait sitting on the fence wins.
That's right.
And that's, you know what I mean?
Exactly. Well,
You
they,
sit right on the fence with the best bait. Whoever has the freshest bait wins.
that's right. Yeah.
And they come to us. No, it's fine. We deal with it. We respect it.
Yeah.
I was just worried that if there was gonna be more
Not-
closures.
No, I don't think anything new that I know of. Basically, it's all in play. The Oregon Fish and Wildlife is dealing with their baseline monitoring, and that's wrapped up. And now they're doing what's called a human dimensions analysis, which is you'll get alerted through Stacy and Kristen and their economist, socioeconomic analyst, whatever he's called, talking about human dimensions. What are the implications?
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you, Paul.
Okay.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Paul.
Thank you very much.
Next thing on the agenda is approval of minutes. Presume everybody's had a chance to read the minutes of our last meeting.
I make, okay, move approval with a remark that Dina's doing an excellent job. I like the condensation and the brevity, but yet you put sufficient detail in to where we understand what the issues were, so keep up the good work.
Here, a second. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, at this time, it is time for our remarks from our citizens.
No one has signed up.
So no one wants to talk, okay? We will continue on to the financials. Everybody have a chance to check the financials for June. You have a list in your packet.
I did add an annual fiscal year to date detailed report for you.
I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to approve the financials so that we can have a discussion and ratify bills to be paid at $89,227.24.
I'll second it.
It's been approved in second. Any other discussion? Okay, Bill.
What's the bottom line so far for the year?
This would be right on the back. I think it's right around 20,000. But this shows a net income of 35, but not everything. I mean, that's as of yesterday, and we still have bills coming in
Okay.
for June.
So we're gonna show a net income of about 20,000. That's good. I mean, I'm always happy to see a positive bottom line. And of course, some of this is going to go into reserves. I was hoping that we'd get a little bit more into reserves, but this is certainly a good start. I did make mention last month of the occupancy report possibly having errors in the Excel spreadsheet. Dean and I went through that with a fine-tooth comb and found out that indeed the numbers are correct. And I just wanted to make sure that we were seeing realistic numbers and they are correct. And if you take a look at it across the yellow lines, we are definitely seeing an increasing occupancy across all of the different service areas. So that's always a good report to see. So, and I think that is a result of the economy bouncing back to some extent. But other than that, I'm real satisfied with the P&L and the balance sheet. things are starting to settle down into a pattern. And I'm really happy that we made that transition. And, thank you so much. So I'm ready for a vote. if
Any
anyone
other
wants.
discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next item is to discuss the commercial mortgage from our last meeting. There was a motion made to grandfather in some of the commercial boats so that they could keep their commercial status, and we got a letter back from our attorney saying that we should not do that because it sets a precedent and it isn't fair to all people. Something to that effect in my words anyway. Do we have any other discussion on that? Bill?
In order for us to deal with this, we would need to have a motion to rescind the previous motion in order to make this legal, if indeed this is what the board wishes to do.
To discuss it?
To rescind the motion that we made previous.
I don't think there's been a motion.
There hasn't been a motion.
I was just gonna say that there was never a motion because
Oh.
it was gonna be put in resolution form and it didn't get to
Okay.
that point.
Yeah, we didn't get quite there.
Okay.
We never voted on
Okay.
it.
So we're neutral.
One thing we did vote on is a 3% increase to commercial mortgage, and we did not have all the facts because 3 years before we had made a 15% increase, I believe, and so we may want to discuss that issue further.
Well, and I think what you may want to take into consideration as well is that Dina has sent out a list of, we were talking about what makes commercial, what doesn't. You gentlemen and ladies agreed that we should rely on the documentation from the boat, not just, not quibble over whether it was or not, but if they had the proper documentation, then we should leave it alone. What we've found is we've sent out letters. We have not gotten the majority of documentation back. So I think what might be a good idea is let's wait till we get all that documentation in, so you know how many boats we're talking about that are outside of that realm, and it may flush itself out just in the fact that the folks don't have the documentation that they claim they have. So then you can have a total discussion on the whole resolution you were trying to put together in the first place. We gave until the end of July to have all of the documentation in.
I've got a question right
Sure.
up front. My mortgage agreement, I'm talking personally, runs through next May. Now, are you changing the terms of my mortgage?
No, because what we would do is we would turn around, and once you guys make the resolution, then as those agreements run out, then they would be brought into, because not everybody's ends on July 1 or starts on that. It
I'll
would
see
just
you next May.
Sure, right,
Right.
it would, well, that's my point, but once we
So-
have all the formal documentation, then that's fine. Financially, it would not change until such time as your contract ran out.
There is a list provided by the state of commercial boats and license and permit holders. And I don't know how to get it, but I know all the fish buyers certainly have it. I'm on their list.
Sure.
And I
we can
think
look-
that would be something that maybe we ought to look into.
But we've looked up and found out the amount of boats that are actually selling fish, to the fish buyers. We found that. That's
That
not
list?
a problem, yeah.
Okay.
But
I
there's
don't,
not-
I don't know about the list.
We found it
I'm gonna-
online.
Okay, well, it's online, yeah, they
Right.
print it out.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so we found that, and it's basically you and one other person. So all of the other boats that claim that they are commercial fishing are not selling fish. All right, so that's why we're gonna rely, and your suggestion was that we rely on their documentation rather than their activity as far as fish tickets and stuff. You wanna see their licenses and that goes along with it. That's what we're asking them to show us those registrations, and to show us their IDs and that sort of thing, and they're slow to get those in.
Well, they won't come in until the mortgage renews, though, right, Bob?
We can ask them for that information at any time. It doesn't, regardless of the contract, if we don't have that information that they should have been giving us, we can still ask them for that, so that they can even, no different than if you rented a house and failed to give the people, the landowner, all of the information for your rental.
No. This is where I disagree. I signed a mortgage agreement last May, and
Yes.
it wasn't required, and then all of a sudden you come along in the middle of my agreement, and I'm just using me, because I can't talk for everybody else. But in my personal experience, you come along in the middle of it and say, hey, now we want to see this paperwork. It's like, well,
I
I'll
don't-
see you in May.
I don't think that's the case. I think our mortgage agreements, I don't know that we've changed our mortgage agreements. We're just enforcing what was there that wasn't enforced in the first place.
Well, we just wanted to, for the commercial boats, we just wanted to see the commercial license.
That's all. I mean, it's not like we're asking
Some of
for.
the customers says, well, I don't have it with me right now, I'll send it to you. We
Right.
never got it.
And we never did.
So we're just asking for it.
Yeah, that's all.
And current boat
Now,
registration,
if
which
they-
is what we need to have regardless, it's
Yeah.
on the application.
Exactly.
Just a copy of the current boat registration, that
And
way
then-
we know that our boats are,
In compliance.
in compliance.
So it's nothing really new, Terry. It's just we're trying to clean up all the documentation that should have been there.
That was required within the contracts.
Right.
It wasn't required when I signed my contract, though.
Documentation was not required.
No, because we just enacted, didn't we?
Yeah.
That's what this resolution was, that we just said that you had to have this, this, and this.
The resolution was you guys wanted to grandfather in because we were questioning the activity of the boats and that. Now, we can go back through it and make sure what it is, but I think if you pick up your mortgage agreement and your terms and conditions, there's nothing on it that has changed since I've been here at all.
And within those terms and conditions, was there a requirement that the commercial fishing fleet provide the documentation?
The documentation is not just for commercial fishing, it's for every boat we have.
Yeah, we want to, on the mortgage application, it says we need the documentation
So
of
that's
the
not
boat
changed.
registration.
Okay? Fair
So it
enough.
changed.
Okay. Now, clarify the 3%. When was that to be
Well,
effectuated?
that was done in May.
Right.
There was a resolution to increase the
Right.
commercial mortgage rates 3% as of July 1st. And
But-
you passed a resolution.
And we passed that resolution based on the fact that there hadn't been an increase for like 10 years.
No.
No, that we.
I mean, that's the
said-
information that we were given.
Well,
That's the
it was a
information we
public
were given.
hearing, and Dave Huntington spoke up saying, I thought there
Right,
was an
exactly.
increase the year before. And we said, and I said, well, I'll look into that, and I did, and I called him, but you went ahead and passed the resolution. So, I mean, where you wanna take it from here is up to you as a board.
Now, and remember that the resolution that you passed, you can undo anything.
Right.
But
Yes,
the resolution.
yes, I know I can.
Right. The resolution that you passed was based on the previous board's resolution
Right.
to raise everything.
Right.
So you didn't, it was not, the premise was not because things hadn't been raised or not, you were affirming the previous boards to continue to raise.
Right.
Now, if that's an issue to you that a year or 2 years ago that they raised it too much, bring it up again and rewrite it. I mean, you can do those things if you feel that wasn't enough
And
information.
there's a great possibility that had been delayed for quite a few years, and we had to catch up. Now we're caught up, in theory, and we should have that 3% CPI built in, or whatever the actual CPI is. I think that was the verbiage.
I believe so.
So if we are caught up, then that 3% should continue on, so we do not have to do that 15 or 20% increase once every 5 or 6 or 10 years. That was the logic behind our argument.
If you'd like, we can come back at next meeting and I can give you some history there. We can go back 10 years and I can just
Sure.
say, this is the track record.
Then
of-
you can decide whether you
And
want
then
to
that
do
way,
it.
that gives you more information to make your decisions on.
I based my vote on the fact that we hadn't had a rate increase in 10 years. Yeah, 3% sounds good. That's what I based my personal vote on. Sorry. I think I was given misinformation.
Maybe we should go back and take a
We
look
can
at the
resend it
information.
if someone wants to make a
Sure.
motion,
Or
vote on it.
I think it's a slippery slope to, and I shouldn't even use that word because I'm not sure of it, but just because we can, why don't we raise rates just because we can? Tell me why we need the 3%, and then I can sit here and say, okay, maybe we do need 3 more percent. I'm not sure why we need the 3%.
Well, again, it was from the previous resolution from the previous board that it be looked at annually as a 3% increase.
Maximum.
And
More or less.
it was up to you to decide whether to do it or not, and you
Do it or
decided
not
to
do
go
it.
with it.
Yeah.
And we know that there is a cost of living increase every year. Things continue to be more expensive.
Then why
And-
did we drop the sport down 25%?
Well, I think that
Did some-
calculations for that,
Because we were overpriced.
yeah. I mean, there's a market, and then there's cost. And we want to try to keep them as close as we can.
So how do we fall into, okay, so now we're saying that we're overpriced in the market on the sports side.
So-
How are we priced in the market on the commercial side?
We are still the cheapest, as far as I know, on the coast.
Yeah, our mortgage rates are least
Even
expensive.
with the 3%.
It's
That
hard to compare.
argument really grates on me because we are not on the coast.
No,
We're
that's
not
true.
Winchester Bay, we're not Newport,
That's true.
we're 6 miles up from the
That's
coast.
true.
And we don't use those as our comparisons.
Okay.
We use things that are on the coast, and we're not on the coast. We're 6 miles from the coast, and that makes a huge difference.
But at the same time, we do need to have some control over our costs, particularly, renting a marina costs money.
Yep.
Regardless of whether you're 6 miles in or 1 mile in, it still costs money. You have overhead. And I think that's what the previous board was looking at. And this year, this board could either ratify or not ratify what the previous board had set up, knowing what they knew from years of experience, that we tend to lag behind in full cost recovery because nobody really wants to charge people more. I mean, that's the last thing I want to do. But at the same time, I don't want to run this port in the red. I mean, $20,000 on a $1.6 million budget is pretty thin. So that should show you evidence that we are pretty close to full cost recovery.
I'm not sure I want to go where I want to go with that.
I'd like to move this to the next meeting and have some more research. I'm like Terry, I was more than happy to pass the 3% because we'd heard that there hadn't been an increase in 10 years.
I
And,
need to know where you got that from.
It come right from the staff.
Yeah,
Who said that we had?
because that's when Mr. Huntington said, whoa, I had a 25% increase 2 years ago.
Right, we said we didn't think it was that much. We didn't say that it wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, that was documented,
No,
and the whole
we-
conversation was documented in
We
the
know
minutes
exactly that it's
from
been
May.
raised. The previous point had been 10 years, not this point.
Yeah, when the
When the
25%.
25% went in.
Oh, well, maybe I misunderstood because my understanding was there hadn't
We
been
would
an
have,
increase.
we
in
would have
10 years.
never
Let me
told
bring
you
back, let me type out the history and the resolutions and
That
bring
so you
back
can
the
see it,
information.
you know, so you
That
can
means he
see.
was misunderstood, I misunderstood, and Dave Huntington misunderstood.
No,
Dave didn't
Dave didn't
misunderstand.
misunderstand. He brought up a point and I looked at it and he was right. And I
He
called
was
and told him
correct.
so.
Well, my question then is, if we're going to go back and reconsider this, what is the basis by which we're going to reconsider? How are we going to compare, contrast, and make a decision whether or not we should increase or decrease the rates? What is the criteria?
Good point. What is the criteria?
You know,
Tell me why we need 3% more or why we should reduce 25%
So this
on,
goes-
on the other hand.
This goes to.
What is the criteria?
This goes to the cost recovery. What is our actual cost? And how much should we charge? Or should we reduce the charge and have some other component of our operation subsidize it? I mean, this is a very complicated, multifaceted discussion, that when you start moving costs over here to over there, how are you going to justify this? Do we want to have all of our services full cost recovery, or do we want to have some of them subsidized? That's really the foundation of the discussion.
Well, no, I think what you need to do is sit and figure out how much it costs to run that commercial side, how much it costs to run the sports side. You know how much it costs to run Moe's Restaurant, how much it costs to whatever. That's how you're gonna figure it.
So you want true cost recovery.
True cost recovery.
Okay, I have
And,
no.
and then figure in the tax base that's supporting it.
Mhm.
I mean, you figure everything in.
I think that we are all in agreement. We want to hold this subject over until the next meeting.
I do.
And we'll do more research,
Yep.
okay? That's,
But
that's what we will do.
Mr.
I
Chair.
don't think we need a motion to do that. Yes.
the burden now is going to be on staff to come back with a full cost recovery model that takes care of all of the services we provide, which I believe you were working on at one time. And we're going to deliver to us within X number of months? Or-
No,
No? Okay. So in order for us to understand what full cost recovery is, we need to take a look at the cost of all of the services we provide.
Should I make that a line item for discussion at the next meeting as well, as what it takes to provide you with full cost recovery?
That, to me, is really the Herculean task here, is to get our mind around
I
what
think
the
it's,
actual
I think
costs
it's
are.
more than we need, that we should be able to ask for the staff. I think the staff is busy enough running the port without putting a burden of them to come up with every item that we do and put a cost recovery figure on it.
So you take this one service out of the entire equation and say, we're gonna take a look at that in a vacuum, what it costs to provide that
Right.
service. And that is going to be
I don't mind
accurate.
doing that, but I don't think we should need to do every one of them to prove your point.
Well, I'm not trying to prove a point here, Ron, I'm just trying to make this so that it's somewhat logical. Otherwise, what we're doing is just basically saying, okay, in isolation, in a vacuum, this is what this is costing, but the rest of the entire process, we'd have no clue. The overhead, staff overhead has to be allocated. The rent, the mortgage, the interest rates, all have to be amortized over all of the different.
So how can you say and do that and then say, well, we're gonna raise it 3%? What's your basis for raising it 3%?
I would say that my basis for raising it 3% is that all of our services should be raised by a certain fixed amount per year, not just mortgage rates, camping rates, fuel rates. They all should be indexed to the CPI. I'm not picking on mortgage. That is the least of my concern. I'm
Yeah,
concerned
I
about
think
the
what
overall.
we're talking about is, and believe me, 3% is trivial, but I've stated how I feel. I feel that we do need to look at it.
Mhm. I
And
agree.
if staff should have a handle on this, be able to say, yeah, we need to raise this 3% because it's costing one person extra time to go down and do this, this, and this, whatever. I'm not sure what the particular reason is why should have to raise it 3%. But if you own a house, you can't just go in and arbitrarily raise it 5% because you just think you need more money. You gotta show an
You
improvement.
have to deal with the market value, see what the market will bear also.
I understand, so it's, the market versus our cost needs to be as close as we can on every service that we provide.
Can I say one more thing? In the meantime, I would like for you to really look at this financial report that I just gave you tonight for last year. Look at the expenses, look at the income, look at how much we have left over, and if we want to build on what's left over, and our capital outlay too, what we have left to spend on capital improvement projects, such as a new restroom. So, take a look at this report, and that will be some good information for you to base your decisions on as well.
Okay, can we move on? Okay, next item is new business, reports. I have nothing to report. I did go to a meeting in the area council on transportation in Springfield and got to sit around with all the mayors of all the other cities around town and talk about nothing. But it was a nice day and a nice trip. and
Discussed it in depth.
I will have to do that every month, since I am the representative of the Port
what meeting was that on?
Act.
Oh, was that?
Yeah, area council on transportation.
Okay.
It's basically ran by ODOT. It is nice to get to know some of the people and contacts, like I know several people at ODOT now. If we had a problem that had to do with a road, I could probably talk to them, but we kind of have our own area down here, so we're okay. Bob, you have anything to report?
Well, to tag on to your ACT meeting, there was a time prior to me and your group, your new group, that we didn't attend a lot of those ACT meetings. By attending those ACT meetings, we're all of a sudden, over the last year, Ron's taken over and been there. John and Scott before, and I used to rotate going to them because it's kind of a pain. I mean, you know, you don't get out of the downtown Eugene meeting until about 9 o'clock or so when you're getting home. But what has happened is we've all of a sudden, not only does Ron know ODOT people, they know us. They've sent a couple of folks out here a couple times since we've started to make some noise in the meetings, and not really noise, but show up, ask questions, and talk about appropriate signage on 101 and 126, how the bridge project, I mean, so they're actually coming now to the port and speaking, simply because we have a representative going to them. So it's, while it's kind of a pain to get to the meetings and back, I think it's well worth it.
Yeah.
We have those contacts now that we didn't have before. And I think having Ron there all the time is going to be a really good asset to us, to those types of things.
I hope so.
Yeah. Well, assuming that you're behaving yourself.
Well, I suppose. That's not even questionable. Anything else?
I think you'll find that we've finished the first phase of our outside storage. Have you put anything back there yet,
I
Terry?
believe we have, yeah.
Oh, have you?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. We found Ron Wells. One of my other positions is I'm the chair of the Environmental Management Advisory Committee to the city. And I was looking for someone that recycled or reused or repurposed asphalt or concrete. And I found Ron.
Ray.
Ray.
Well, it's Norm.
Norm, that's right, Norm Wells. And has a huge tub grinder and grinds the stuff up. We can buy it from him cheaper than we can buy our gravel. And we've put a section out there to put our outside storage in. Looks real clean. We'll test it this year and see really how well it holds up. Appears like it's going to do really well, but we'll see how it works. I think for the gear, the crab pots and things, gives it a much better level surface, brings it up forward so that we'll have less trash, less people throwing stuff in there, keep the junk out of it. I think
Does it compact?
Yeah, he rolled it, and you walked around on it, I assume.
No, I didn't. I drove it. I actually thought it was crushed gravel.
Yeah, no, and it's what he does is he explains when he does a job and he picks up the asphalt, he'll go down an inch or two and pick up the aggregate underneath, and then it all goes into the hopper. So it's kind of a combination, and as it gets compacted, it actually adheres more and more and more. So over time, our hope is, and his hope is that it compacts even greater than. And we had to use an auger to dig a hole in it to put up the posts and stuff.
It's got a tar content.
It does,
So
yeah.
it'll as it gets warmer.
Should,
No,
it
it's
should.
good
So,
material.
yeah, so, yeah, as you drive on it and stuff, if I don't see it, please let me know how it's working, because it's,
What
it's
is
kind
the,
of a test.
You say it's cheaper than gravel.
Yeah, he charges delivered, I think it was $20.45 a cubic yard instead of the $24.50 that is typical, so, yeah, we'll see. But looks pretty interesting. Back area is really cleaned up a lot. We've got one last little section that needs to be done. And then the 4th of July show went extremely well. We fired off for the first time in a long time off at the end of the property there. We had to be 400 feet back, which worked out perfectly to the last motorhome. We had a great view, I assume. And it worked out very well. Fire trucks were established everywhere they should be, and I think everybody had a pretty good time.
I think the show was only 23 minutes, though.
Yeah. But and it gave a real good view that people were able to see actually how they function, because you're just looking at a clear shot just 400 feet away. So worked out real well. Dug some trenches, covered the trenches back up. Everybody was happy. So pretty good. And as you're seeing, the place is packed. So it's a little earlier than normal, but we'll take
Heat
it.
in the valley brings people to the coast.
Well, that's true too. Yeah. The hotter it gets in Eugene, the quicker they come over. So.
You have anything, Bill?
We're going to an executive session.
Yes,
Okay.
but after I check and see if the rest of the commissioners have anything they'd like to say or report.
I'm-
Nancy? No? What about you?
No, I don't.
Okay. Okay, then at this time, I'm gonna close the regular meeting, and the commissioners will go into executive session, and everyone will be asked to leave except for the press.
And you reserve the right to come back to the public session.
And we will reserve the right to come back into a public session if we need to act on something.
What I'll do is I'll call it.
And that's it.
I'm going to reopen the Port of Siuslaw meeting at 8:26 to make remarks concerning our real estate transaction that we just talked about.
I would, should this be an emotion or just simply a
Discussion.
request, a discussion that, because of a potential problem, I would ask the manager that if a big corporation wants to buy this, what recourse would the port have, or,
The 40 acres.
yes, the whole thing, if something that comes in and wants that, just to have some wording in the contract that protects both parties or the port.
Yeah, right now, I don't think we have anything in the documentation that speaks to if a corporation wanted to buy the whole thing, but was not fond of the lease option that would exist. I don't think we have anything in there that would require Pacific Landings to, or notify them. We could have something in there possibly that said, gives them the first right of refusal to match the dollar amount of the corporation or something like that, assuming that a corporation did not like that they had that lease option in there. And that would give them the option to purchase it, give them X amount of days to, I would have to speak with John Wolf and get the exact terminology of how that would happen. But we could put some verbiage in there that worked around that.
Or it's possible that if some other private party wanted to buy that, they could buy that lease from us as well.
Exactly, so I'm thinking you're right, that's a good catch, and I'm sure we can put some verbiage together really quickly that will cure that problem.
That we would have to be ensured that if they wanted to purchase it, that they would be willing to allow their lease to be
Just to be
purchased.
purchased as well. All right, yeah, we can do something like that. I think that's very doable. Everything else is really clean, and our legal counsel is real happy with it. I've talked to Pacific Landings, they're happy with it. That's the only glitch that I think, and it's a good catch.
Do we need to make a motion concerning this?
No, you've already told us to go ahead and do the
Okay.
negotiation, and that you would sign it
Okay.
once we're agreed with. So
Yeah.
I think we're fine with that.
And
It
we're just instructing you to
go do
fix
something
that
else.
Yeah,
little
just
Fix that one
issue
glitch.
that- yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, I'll do it.
Guess that's it. I'm closing the meeting again.
Yeah.